Hello, welcome back to my JavaScript tutorial series. Today I'll be covering loops. I'll be talking about loops. So, what are loops? So, a loop is a programming tool that helps us to iterate or to repeat over a given set of data, Yeah, so there are different types of loops, and today we're going to be looking at 4 of them. That is the for of loop, the do while loop. As you can see in this HTML document that I'm going to be using for the demonstration, there's a type called the for loop, and then we have the do while loop. Maybe let me list them down here. Have the for loop, we have the do while loop, and then we have the for of loop, and then the for in. Loop. So let me move this spaces here. Well, these dots are just really for illustration. Yeah, there's no big deal with them. So we have the for loop, the do while loop, the for of loop, and the for in loop. That's what I'm going to be covering in this tutorial. Yeah. So let's start with the for loop. Start with the for loop. And for that, I'll show you very quickly the HTML template we're going to be using. This is the template that I'm going to be using for this tutorial. And I have 4 buttons, all of them in a paragraph element. This we're going to use it to run the for loop, and then this one we shall use it to run the do while loop. This one we shall use it to run the for of loop, and then the last one we'll use it to run the for in loop. So for the for in loop, let's first of all create this function. I'll copy it here. I'll make an arrow function. Okay, it's going to be an equal sign here. Sign arrow. So for a for loop, you start by writing the keyword for, and then you put the parentheses, and then the first it takes in 3 arguments that are separated by semicolons. The first is going to be initialization. I'll say, let me call my initial value I. It can be anything. I'm just using I maybe to mean an integer. It can be A, it can be any letter that you use. And I'll say my initial value is 0 for I, and then I'll put a semicolon. And then the second argument is going to be the condition. What do I want to do? The condition is going to be when I is less than. When I is less than 5, that's going to be my condition. And then the third argument is going to be what I want to do in every repeat or every iteration. So in that case, I want to add 1. So I write I, then plus plus. That's how I write it in JavaScript. So for every repeat of this loop, I want to add 1 to the initial value of I. So I can start by saying make console.log I. Just want to see the initial value of I. Then after that, I want to console.log I. We're going to see I as it increases, the initial value, and as it increases for every loop. And that means once the value of I becomes once the value of I is less than 5, and I want to keep, yes, once the value of I becomes 5 and greater, right? Once I is no longer less than 5, then the loop will stop. So this condition makes the loop stop our running the code. If you don't have this condition, you can have what they call a continuous loop, an endless loop, which is not good because it can make your computer crash. So anytime you want to do something repeatedly without having to do it multiple times, you put it in a loop, and put a condition. Under what condition it should run, and what condition, at what condition it should stop running. And so this is the loop that I'm using right here, which is the for loop. Now let's check it out. Let me open the developer console and let's test our code. So if I click on this button, as you can see, we see all the values. The first value of I is 0, which is the initial value. And then in the second time, it repeats, it adds 1. So 0 plus 1, we get 1 here. And then the third time, it adds a 2. The fourth time, it adds the third time, it adds another, it adds a 1 to 1, we get 2. And that continues until we reach 4. So once it reaches 4, once you add 1 to 4, it becomes 5. Once it becomes 5, this condition becomes false, and then the loop stops. So as you can see, we've used a for loop here to run this piece of code 5 times. The first time it gives us a value of 0, second time it gives us a value of 1, second time it gives us a value of 2, value of 3 then, and then lastly a value of 4. So that is what a for loop is. So a for loop, you have the for keyword, then you have the parentheses, then you have the initial value, initialization, you have the condition, and then you have the manipulation, what you want to do at every iteration of that loop. Okay, so now let's move on to the next part. The second part is going to be a do while loop. Do while loop. And the do while loop starts with a keyword do, then you have parentheses, and then you have your condition right here. While let me say here, I'll use A. While A is greater than 0. Okay. So now let me first initialize A. What is A? Let A equal to 5. My initial value of A is 5. So I want to do something as long as A is greater than 0. As it stands now, A is 5, and so it is greater than 0. And so every time we have A as greater than 0, we shall have our loop run. So I can first start by logging that to the console, console.log. Here I'll say the initial value of A is, and then I'll put it right here. And then what do I want to do? Every time the loop runs, I want to subtract 1 from A. And for that, I'll say A equals minus 1. So that means every time we have the loop run, we're going to subtract 1 from A. Then maybe I can console.log the new value of A after subtracting 1. The new value of A is, I'll give it right here. Okay, so now let's put this in a function to run our loop, which is going to be, I'll copy this function right here. I'll make it another function. Okay. All right, so let's run this do while loop and we check in our console. Okay, I think I just got into an endless loop. While A is greater than 0, I'm going to do A equals minus plus. Oh, I'm sorry, it's going to be minus equals 1. Minus equals 1. Okay, I have to stop here because it's going to crash my computer. So I had run into the phenomenon that I just talked about, which is the endless loop. And for here, I'm going to, if I do this, let me go to my console right now. Run. As you can see here, we get the loop running. We have the initial value being 5, and then which is this one, and then we subtract 1, we get it becoming 4, and then we have a new value here which is 4, and then now our initial value becomes 4. Again, we subtract 1, the new value becomes 3. So it keeps subtracting 1 until we get to a condition whereby A is not greater than 0. So once A becomes less than 0, the loop stops. The loop immediately stops, and then we go out of it. Okay. Yeah. Maybe let me move back a little bit to the for loop just to add some spice to it. As you can see in this tab, I had already opened a page that has something to do with emojis. Let me add some emojis to this just to show you, to add some spice to it. Yeah. So as you can see in my HTML here, I have a data paragraph ID that has a paragraph that is empty that has an ID of data. Let me add something to it. Let me add some text to it. So for that, I'm going to say const, let me call it data para. It's got a document that gets element by ID, and I would call it data. Excuse me. And then I want to create a child element, const.child element, which is also going to be a paragraph, of course. It's going to be document.create element. And I'll call it a paragraph. So I want to add HTML to the child element .innerHTML. I'm going to use template literal. Let me say the number, the value, the iteration value in this loop. It can be anything. In this loop is so let me add an emoji. Just an concept that I wanted to bring in this tutorial to show you how to add an emoji to your JavaScript. So we shall use the string method, then plus dot from code point, and then we shall get our code point from here. So there is interesting website called Emojipedia, which has all kinds of emojis, right? So for this case, I want to put a winking face as my emoji into my HTML page. And what happens, you come here, you go to the technical information, and this gives you all the details about that emoji. Here's the emoji, the picture, and then the code point. So the code point is the Unicode value that your computer reads for it to display that emoji. Yeah, so for this winking face, the code point is U plus 151F609. So in JavaScript, we are going to drop this U plus, and we shall replace it with this 0x so that we can display that emoji. It's going to be 0 and then X, and then the rest of the characters will be copied, right? I can just copy and paste it here, or I can just type it in. Very easy either way. So the iteration value in this loop is, then I'll put my emoji, and then I'll put my value here, which is going to be I. My value, which is going to be I. Okay, so now that I've added that, I now need to append my child element. It's going to be data para dot append child, and then I'll put my child element. All right, so let me format. So let's see, let's run this. Good. So I've added some HTML, as you can see. The iteration value in the loop is, then I have my winking emoji from here, and then I have the value. Okay, yeah, so I moved it just a little bit back to add some spice to this, but it was enough for the first part just to show you how it works. But this is just really adding some graphics to it, which you can do. And you probably most likely, if you're developing an application, need to loop over something and display something which is graphic. So it is always better to explore when you're coding different things, because really software development is just a field of imagination. There is nothing that is fixed that this is this. No, it's not maybe like chemistry that this reaction will give you this, and there is nothing else that can come out. In software development, you have to be creative, think of anything and create it, code it. So enough of that talk. I was just giving you some more insights. Now let's go to the next type of loop. The next type is going to be the for of loop. Sorry, it's going to be for of loop. And the for of loop is used in arrays. It's used to iterate or to repeat over different items in arrays. That's typically its application, its use in a data type called arrays, right? So for that, I'll start by creating an array. Let me create an array of names, and I'll start by giving, okay, let me say the first name is going to be Mukiza. The next is going to be Manzi. The next is going to be Mutawazi. The next I'm going to be Monezero. Say the next is going to be Tsukishime. Let me make the last one Mutuzo. Okay, so I have an array of 6 names, and I want to iterate over every name and maybe do something with it. Maybe display it on the screen, log it to the console. For this case, I'm going to log it to the console. So for that, let me first write the function that I'm going to use to run this loop. And from my HTML here, I call this function run for of loop. I'll just copy it here. Function run for of loop. And I'll start by writing my for keyword. So I'm going to say for, then brackets, name of the names array. What do I want to do? You realize I've put underscore here to name because name is a keyword in JavaScript. So if I don't put it there, it will show the cancel line to be cancelled through. It's because that's the keyword in JavaScript. So I just have to put name so that differentiates it from that. So I'll say from name of names, I want to just cancel log the name. And call it the current name being shown in the array, being shown in the array is, then I'll just make it my second argument, name. Okay, so I'm going to iterate over every name here, and then I'll log it to the console. So let's run the loop here. Exactly. So as you can see, the current name being shown in the array is Mukiza, is Manzi, is Mutawazi. Here, I just need to move A here, and I'll run it again. Is Mukiza, Manzi, Mutawazi, Munezero, Tsukishime, and Mutuzo. Okay. So yeah, for of loop, we use it to iterate over elements in an array. So in this case, I've had an array that has strings, name strings. We can be an array of objects, can be an array of numbers, it can be an array of arrays. So you just iterate over every element in that array, and you can manipulate it any way that you want. So that's the use of the for of loop. Now, the last loop type that I'm going to look at here is the foreign loop. It's going to be the foreign loop. And I'll start by writing the function that I'm going to use to run it. It's going to be run foreign loop. And for that, so the foreign loop is used really to iterate over an object. And in that case, it will give you the properties or the keys of an object. Okay, so if you have an object, let me say, for example, I'll say const object. Let me call it here. And that object, I'll say name. Let me give it a property of name. And the name, call it Kagame. Oh, no. Let me call it Felix. Felix T. Sorry, get yes, Felix T. And then I'll say age. I'll say 35. I'll say home city and give a property of home city. Home city, I'll call it Kinshasa, and then I'll say profession, I'll call it comedian. Okay, so name is Felix T, age is 35, city is Kinshasa, and the profession is comedian. Okay, so I now want to run a foreign loop. I want to iterate over every element in that object. Okay, so I'll say for, let me call the element L in object. For element in object, what do I want to do? Maybe element is not the right word. It's not the best word. Let me call it property. Let me say property that pop to mean for property. So you can just cancel log the property. Console.log the property being shown is, and I'll just put here prop. Okay, and I can access actually the value of that property or that key just by the same using, let me say here, console.log the value of the prop being shown is, say this, make the second argument, and I'll just say here that will be, I'll put the object and then I'll pass in the prop here, the square brackets. And so that should give us the value to that property or to that key. So let's run the foreign loop and see. Exactly. So here we see the property being shown is the name. The name is right here. And then the value of the prop being shown is Felix T. Just to make it maybe more easily to differentiate, just add those 3 small dashes. Yeah, the property being shown is name. The value of the name here is Felix T. The property being shown is age. The value of the prop 35, home city, and then here the value is Kinshasa. So yeah, foreign loops, use them to iterate over objects, which is another different data type in JavaScript. And for every time we loop over every property in the object, we can manipulate it. We can either reassign its value, or we can show it, display it. And usually in applications, you'll iterate over every property in an object, which is a data type that will be coming from the backend to display it on the screen, to display it as something. And so you'll definitely have to use a for loop if you want to display it separately. You can either use the dot notation, or you can use a for loop to display it at different intervals if you want it to be showing repeatedly. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's what I had for you about loops. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. I'll be posting this code to my GitHub repo, and I'll link the URL to the description of this video. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.